All right, welcome everyone. My name is Rod Stellmuller, and I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation just to give you an idea about what Aviatrix does, because there's some people in the audience that maybe don't know exactly what Aviatrix does. And then what we're going to do is I'll bring up George Buckman, and George is with Gainwell Technologies, and we'll have a little fireside chat so that you can actually hear from the customer, which of course you guys want to hear from more than you want to hear from me, but we'll have that little conversation, and then we'll open up for some questions. So there's a mic, or there used to be a mic in the center of the room. Where is it now? Oh, it's in the back. So if you have a question you think about when we're doing our Q&A session, jump on the mic because they're recording it, and we'd like to get that question in the recording as well. So let's just get started here. I like to introduce Aviatrix through our customers because, a lot of you don't know who we are, and so this gives you an idea of the kind of customers that we're dealing with. Now, we have about 550 enterprise customers, and as you can see here, pretty much every vertical out there. I'd say about 60% of these are using Aviatrix in a multi-cloud environment that I'll talk a little bit about. But a lot of them, the other 40%, are using us in a single cloud. Maybe it's AWS, maybe it's Azure, but they're using us in a single cloud because they want the additional advanced functionality that Aviatrix provides for cloud networking, as well as the visibility that we provide that people are missing with the native constructs. I'll just give you a little bit of the accolades that are out there. Gartner it talks about us as saying to shortlist Aviatrix if you're looking for those advanced networking capabilities that are not provided by the core functionality that's delivered by the cloud service providers. And then you can see we've won a bunch of different awards in 2022, and we've got even more coming out as we move forward. Now, to give you an idea about where kind of we fit in things, pretty much every layer of the cloud stack these days, enterprises are upgrading to get to better functionality, better feature set, and get that multi-cloud operational model. So that's happening, for instance, at the workload and performance management, at the data and analytics. Some of you might be using Datadog or Snowflake at the automation software level. Some of you may be using Terraform, giving you that advanced features and that multi-cloud operating model. And that's where Aviatrix comes in to do that at the network and security layer. So we call that intelligent cloud networking. Now, what that is if you think about how networking is done in each one of the clouds, it's a little bit different in each one of the clouds because the underlying constructs in the cloud are different. And this becomes a challenge for the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure teams who want to be able to support applications running in the cloud that they run best in. And some applications just simply run better in some clouds than the other. Or they might run into a situation where they do an acquisition and all of a sudden they need to manage stuff that's going on in a different cloud. In any case, what we do is we upgrade those native constructs with the Aviatrix constructs and make it the same in each one of the clouds. Right? So now you have the ability to have it in a single cloud or connect them with a multi-cloud environment. So now you have this ability to create the networks exactly in the same way, consistently across those different clouds. You have consistent visibility and control across all of those clouds. Consistent embedded security, which I'll talk a little bit about, but that gives you the ability to, for instance, do layer 4 firewalling in the network as opposed to connected to the network the way the architecture has been, because now we have that processing capacity to be able to do some of this firewalling, for example, in the network. And then finally, multi-cloud automation. So we have a single Terraform provider. You can write one infrastructure as code module, and it will work across all of the clouds in a very consistent way. Now, the reason that people do this is to really build a business-critical cloud networking infrastructure. And you see the the white words here are a lot of the specific things that we can do in terms of performance and availability and talent bottlenecks and operational visibility. All of that all contributes to that business critical infrastructure to support the business critical applications that are now moving in the cloud. Over the last, say, 3 years, a lot of enterprises were kind of playing around in the cloud, doing some things, but they weren't the business critical applications. And now we're finding a lot of enterprises moving things like SAP into the cloud, or other business critical applications like Epic or NetSuite, that they really need the enterprise class capabilities in the network to be able to have the visibility, to be able to have the advanced features they need to support those applications. So what makes Aviatrix unique? It's really about our platform, and the platform has a couple of different pieces to it. One we call Aviatrix Airspace, and this is the network data plane, and where we have this intelligent telemetry to give you the visibility and control you need, and the distributed control, so the ability to then push things like firewall rules into the network itself at every point in the network. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the second half of this is what we call Aviatrix Copilot. Now, this is the visualization platform, the way that you're able to look at what's going on in the network, look at that telemetry that's in the network, and then also do what we call programmable intent. So create those rules that get put in for layer 4 firewalling, for example. Now, the really interesting thing about this is when you create those rules, you're not pushing them to a firewall, per se. You're pushing them into the network. So you don't have to say, put it on this firewall and route the traffic through that firewall. We're looking at everything that's going through the network. And we're going to put those rules close to the VM or the instance that we're protecting there. And if that VM or that instance moves, then the rules that are protecting it will move with it. So let's look a little bit about this. The embedded telemetry, we're looking at network traffic telemetry, we're looking at security telemetry, cost telemetry. I'm going to show you a couple of things on each one of these, and then application telemetry, as well as distributed control. So some of that I talked about distributed firewalling, but some of this is for intelligent traffic control, right? So being able to say, hey, I want to push this traffic down the high performance route or down the low cost route, or decide, is this an available route? If it's not, route it a different way and have equal cost, multi-path ways to get through the cloud network. Now, the programmable intent I talked about, you can think about this as like, if I see this kind of traffic, then do this action. And the different actions can be security actions, like firewalling, or they can be the traffic control actions. And you can see a bunch of different things that we can do and direct traffic there. So it kind of looks like this. This is a very simple picture of that programmable intent, where I basically am saying, okay, I can have the app server talking to the database server, and I can have the front-end servers talking to the app servers, but I don't want the front-end servers talking to the database. So we would create that rule and then push that into the network, and we could apply those rules wherever it's necessary through the infrastructure. And to just give you an idea of how this is important, this is a picture that you see a lot of red dots there, and this isn't actually the one from our customer that had this issue, but we had a customer, saw a bunch of red dots like this, and they were very surprised because what this is showing are malicious IPs that are talking to workloads in their cloud. Now, they basically said, well, why am I seeing all this stuff? None of my entire security stack sees any of this right now. And the problem was that those are single point of inspection. So if the traffic's not flowing through the inspection point, you're not seeing any of this, right? Where we're seeing these threats happen because we're seeing all traffic that goes across the cloud network. And we're able to compare that to a database of malicious IPs. Now, we don't make that database. It's made by Proofpoint, same people who make it for guard duty in AWS. But because we're seeing everything on the network, we don't have to go through a specific spot for the traffic, because in the cloud, things can come in and go out from anywhere, and now you have the ability to see when you're talking to some of those. The customer I was talking about, they ended up finding Bitcoin mining, they found Tor servers, they found botnets that were doing DDoS attacks out of their cloud using their workloads. So some pretty interesting things that the rest of their security stack wasn't seeing at all. We give you the ability to see a dynamic topology map, how this is connected, how across your multi-cloud network. And you can click on and drill down into these and do packet capture and ping and trace route and a lot of things that networking teams want to be able to do, but have a hard time doing in the cloud, right? This is, you want to do a ping, you have to spin up an instance to do a ping. It's a real pain. But being able to do this from any point in the network is very powerful. We can look at every flow on the network. So this is essentially net flow statistics, right? But we can search and sort on source, destination, port, protocol, drill all the way down into TCP flags to troubleshoot application issues. Or we can look at these flows as a heat map and see exactly where the traffic is coming from around the world that's hitting your cloud. And security guys love this because they can look and say, okay, I understand why we're talking to South America, but what's going on there in northern China that I should be concerned with? And normally it's just, scanning for those open ports where they're trying to get in. But if I see a connection established, that's something I want to drill in and find out a little bit more about. We provide a lot of audit reporting capabilities. We find that a lot of people have to work with their compliance teams and provide the audit that shows that they're complying with PCI or HIPAA regulations, and we provide all the data and the reporting necessary for them to do that. This is going to give you an idea of some of the troubleshooting capability. This is something we call App IQ. And it's a simple interface here. You're giving a source instance and a destination instance, what port you want to look at this application that's going on. And then this next is a 45-second video, but basically the result of doing this lets me see how that instance is connected to the other instance, the entire equal cost multipath, all of the latencies that are associated there, each one of the devices in the path. Do they have the right memory? Am I peeking out on something that would cause kind of this issue? I can look at trends. I can then go and look at, for instance, route tables and security groups and all of the things that traffic would have to flow through in order to connect between these two devices. And as I drill down further and further, I find here there's a security group issue. And very quickly, I could then click on that link and go right in where I could create the security group that would actually allow those to connect. And now the interesting thing about this is that this report takes about 20 seconds to generate, and then you scroll through and you can find exactly where the problem is. To get all of the information that's in this report, you would have to bring up at least a dozen windows in the AWS console and do a whole bunch of human correlation to figure out where that problem is. And we do that all for you automatically. And then I mentioned cost telemetry. So this is something we just released called Cost IQ. And a lot of people have cloud financial management systems that they're using. You can analyze your bill from AWS or from Azure and see exactly what instance or subscription is using what instances or VMs. And you can understand how much that account is using in terms of the cloud infrastructure. But what we found from the customers is that there's a big challenge in looking at shared resources. So if I have a pool of next generation firewalls, or I have a S3 connection, or my direct connect connection, and I've got a bunch of different lines of businesses or groups that are using that, there's no real way to understand and be able to accurately allocate who's using those shared resources. So with Cost IQ, what we allow you to do is define your cost centers, like these accounts are all part of engineering, and then define the shared resource itself, and then say, now let's look and see exactly how much, based on network utilization, is being used of that shared resource so that you can allocate those costs out, or at least be able to show back if you're not going to charge back so that people understand who's using it. Because today, what people typically do is they say, okay, well, we're going to just peanut butter across everybody and everybody's going to have to pay the same amount because we have no idea who's using what on this. Of course, HR believes that engineering is using a little more than them, so they don't understand why they're having to pay so much. And now we're starting to apply everything that I was just talking to business critical applications. So this is something that we most recently had started doing. A lot of this was capabilities that were there, but we're just exposing it a little bit better. So for instance, that App IQ that I showed you, now you can have SAP specific lens on top of this. So now when I pick an endpoint, these two endpoints have to do with the SAP application. So now when the basis engineer is trying to figure out what's wrong or why SAP is running slow, he can look at all of those stats that I just kind of went through and see how is this specifically affecting the communications for SAP. And we've taken one more step on that, is actually building dashboards where you can do the topology map, for example, and this is specific to your SAP application. So I can see exactly how things are connected. And if you see kind of in the bottom there, we look at inter-app latencies. So now you can say, okay, between this part of the SAP infrastructure and this piece, what is the latency there? And I can click on that and look at the trend. So am I seeing a trend where latencies are starting to go up, or what's going on? So very, very powerful capabilities. So that's it for me. I want to invite George up on the stage, and we'll do a little fireside chat, talk about what George has been seeing and a little bit about Gainwell. And then we'll open up for Q&A after that.
Well,
hi, George. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I know we've known each other for several years now.
Yes.
I know you were at DXE when we first met, and now at Gainwell. Maybe tell us a little bit about, I mean, I think we've got a couple of slides where you can explain what Gainwell is all about.
Sure, yeah. So Gainwell Technologies, that's us. Gainwell's only about 2 years old. We are a story of divestitures and acquisitions and big service provider selling off parts of its business to monetize that, and voila, Gainwell was created. But about 50 years experience in the health and human services technologies, and we are probably the leading provider of cloud services in that industry. We are the #1 provider of Medicaid services, with 51 of the U.S. states and territories as our clients. So,
yeah, great.
So that's it.
All right.
And I've been dealing with Aviatrix. I like to joke, I say I was dealing with Aviatrix in the year 2 BM.
Yeah, before millennium.
Exactly. I predate you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I joined in 2019, I think it was, but you were at DXC, and George is actually one of the first ACE engineers out there. Went through the ACE training. We now have 18,000 ACEs that are part of it, and so George was one of the first ones.
150.
150.
Something like that.
That's fantastic. So the talk is about simplicity instead of complexity in cloud networking. Is this let's talk a little bit about how you guys have made things a little bit simpler, and do you think if you didn't have Aviatrix, it would be complex to do what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I like to think, yes. I started out in the service provider side, so was always looking for ways to simplify and make things easier when we started our cloud journey. I really don't like that phrase, cloud journey. I like to call it cloud quest. A cloud journey is simple, easy. It's a walk in the park. You're going to the Grand Canyon with your kids and family, looking over. Oh, nice.
Right.
But a quest, man, you're getting to that edge. You're jumping on a donkey, going down, getting in the river. That's what it's like on a cloud journey. Nothing's easy.
Yeah.
Right. So simplifying that, and especially in the network space. in a service provider world, your networking team and your cloud team are different people, different organizations. So when we started into that quest for the cloud, I realized quickly that we needed to simplify cloud networking to a level where our existing network resources could be engaged and provide solutions that they're used to seeing. Right. Terminology and capabilities that they're used to dealing with to simplify that process. So.
Now, was that just for a single cloud, or did you start with multi-cloud capability that you were trying to?
We started with single cloud because that's where we were focusing our platform as a service on. So we're building a platform to provide that common framework for all of our cloud-based services to deploy upon. But we quickly realized that, hey, not all apps are created equal in every cloud. So thus the need for multi-cloud came pretty quickly.
Right. So you, as I understand it, kind of started with Aviatrix, at least at Gainwell, but you had discovered Aviatrix at DXC,
at DXC,
right?
Correct.
And I hear a lot of customers that I talk to say the reason they love it is because it creates this simplicity, and they can't even imagine how they would do it without Aviatrix.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's interesting because a lot of people who don't know about Aviatrix don't think that way. They're powering through. Network guys, they're masters of complexity. They think they can do it, but as it scales out, is that when you discovered it as you tried to scale out, or was it?
Well, when I was engaged to help with the project, we called it our Title 19 project. It was, again, all those acquisitions, and I didn't know it at the time, but they were preparing that environment to be spun off. And so there were multiple acquisitions that came from HP Enterprises, that came from DXC, that came from Molina, different parts of the business being combined into one and moving into the cloud. So the complexity was there immediately for me. And having had exposure to Aviatrix experience, when I was engaged for that project, I said, no, we're putting this in from the get-go, from the beginning, from Greenfield. And man, so it grew from nothing to now to where we have probably 190 site-to-cloud connections, over 90 accounts with over 160 TGW attachments. So it's a pretty robust environment now. And without the simplicity of having the orchestration of Aviatrix, that controller to help us deploy and manage all of that, I couldn't have done it.
Now, are you guys doing the configuration through the UI, kind of through Copilot, or do you use infrastructure as code and Terraform things?
Mostly because we started with our core and it was a one-time build, we focused on doing it through the console, through the UI.
Okay.
And that's where most of the work done. I was, as part of DXC, I also began to train operations resources on the functionality of Aviatrix, because can't be a one-man show, right?
Right, exactly.
So fortunately, it was much simpler to teach our network team Aviatrix, and so when we started into what became Gainwell, that project, I already had a network team spun up and support already engaged through our supplier that was providing our network.
Now, were these the network team? Did they come from on-prem and they're learning
Correct.
the cloud? Is that okay?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, we run it. We see that a lot, and you guys are unique from the standpoint that you start greenfield with Aviatrix. I mean, most of our clients, say 95% of our customers, actually go from brownfield. They already have a deployment in AWS or in Azure, and they need to move the connections that are already made there to Aviatrix. And a lot of people are fearful of that, thinking it's risky and it's not. But it turns out it's actually very easy.
It is. We've had our share, a little bit of that, but because I started with the Gainwell side, greenfield, not a ton. But we did inherit some workloads in different cloud providers or people that were already ahead of us in the cloud and had those solutions that we've had to connect and add and install gateways because they didn't consult anybody when they put in their IP scheme. So you need the NAT functionality, you need the advanced capabilities that don't exist in
right.
in a native cloud environment.
Yeah, so you guys are using some of the NATing capabilities, some of the
We are.
overlapping IPs and all of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I imagine, as a healthcare provider capability, you have compliance and governance and so forth. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of security that you guys are using, leveraging Aviatrix?
Yeah, where we've had to install security checkpoints, and I've had situations where, hey, we need something installed fast, like in the next 24 hours. I need a firewall in front of this workload. So we use the Aviatrix Firenet.
Firenet, okay.
And was able to actually deploy and have a firewall configured in 24 hours. So that was a huge win.
Great, yeah. Just so everybody knows what Firenet is, because I didn't really talk about Firenet, but basically Firenet is our ability to bring in and do service insertion of an external firewall, like a Palo Alto Networks firewall or something, and then do all the automatic routing to that firewall.
That's the great part about it. Simplify the configuration stand-up and the routing. It's all automated through the controller, so you don't have to, be a firewall expert necessarily. So after the deployment, just engage the firewall team and say, go put your rules in.
Yeah, and without having to go do the manual updating of routing tables and all that, because we automate all of that.
So our environment's a bit unique in that we're a hybrid environment. Our platform is AMS, so shout out to the AMS folks. And so they're our support organization when we first started this journey. It's not a journey, it's a quest.
Yeah, that's right.
Started this quest. So we had to engage. We think we were trailblazers in that space as well, dealing with AMS and Aviatrix. So we had to make some modifications with AMS to allow us to be able to insert routes. Because the AMS service is designed to be simple and consumed, and they provide all the support and services, including controlling the routing. But with Aviatrix, we were able to actually control that routing on our end, and they permitted that. So
do you do that as a request, and then you implement the routing capabilities, or are they using Terraform and doing some automation there?
No, we actually do it through the controller, through the controller. So what Aviatrix did for us initially is enable us to not have our network folks have to have access to all these VPCs or rely on AMS or RFCs, requests for changes, to go in and add routes to those. We were able to, when a new workload came on, a new account came on, it was onboarded, we were able to quickly provision and do all the routing updates through the UI.
Right. Now, let's talk a little bit about visibility and control, troubleshooting. Can you think of any times when you were able to identify a problem or drill in and solve a problem?
Absolutely. On a daily basis, you get requests from different accounts or different things that they need this connectivity. We took the approach to, for security reasons, to only connect what's absolutely needed. So not to route everything everywhere. We created the network domain and the connection policies, and only connect what's needed when. So using the interface to be able to quickly determine drawing a blank on some of your names, you change them on me.
Yeah, that this group can talk to that group and
Yep. So you do you're able to quickly go in and look and see what's configured to talk to what, and then make those quick additions and changes. But also using the NetFlow data to, we had a particularly complex problem where we were suffering from some performance issues, and we're able to use the NetFlow data to point us to, here's exactly where this firewall is slightly underpowered and you need to increase that. So, there's, and you only have a handful of people that are actually, doing all this. So it's great. I couldn't imagine how many people it would actually take to support the number of TGW attachments, the routing, everything that we have, having to do that manually.
Yeah, and that's how big of a team is it? Do you have a pretty small team that's dealing with this?
Yes, it's pretty small. So, I'm the architect, but I also been the engineer and support person in a startup. But we have just probably a group of 4 people on the operations side that support this around the clock.
Okay.
So.
Well, talking about support, have you leveraged Aviatrix support, working with the team?
Oh my goodness!
Doing some architecture?
You know what? Yeah, Aviatrix is an extension of our team. From day one, the relationship there has just been phenomenal, and I think it's been gone both ways.
Yep.
Coming from a service provider world, when Aviatrix was young, we had a lot of interactions back and forth and a lot of suggestions, and especially in the early days, we would make a request to get something in, and it was done in 2 weeks at times. Now that you've got a larger customer base, don't expect that, guys, okay? But
actually, you can expect it, by the way.
2 weeks?
Yeah, no, we turn.
All right.
We turn code pretty quickly. Yeah.
So, yeah, this has just been a great experience, and whenever I need anything, I'm just calling Corbin up. Shout out to Corbin. I just call him, and he gets the guys on the phone right away, and we work through issues, problems. Usually it's not something simple, and I'm bringing it to them. It's pretty something that we hadn't thought of that before.
Yeah, I heard a story just the other day. A customer had, they're using Topology Replay. Have you ever used
Yes,
it?
absolutely. Saved my bacon a couple times.
Yeah, so I didn't show it up here, but Topology Replay is the ability to sort of go back in time and say what changed, who changed it, what did it affect. And I've heard some stories here, even at the show recently, about a customer who had some downtime and they needed to prove that it wasn't them. AWS was pointing the finger and saying, no, that wasn't us, it was you. And they were able to look back and see exactly what happened and see all of the switchovers to DR and why that happened, so they could have what they call evidential data. So this is some really interesting things that we show here.
Yeah, in a complex routed environment where you have multiple points tying into your on-prem network, you've always got the potential for routing loops and things of that nature. So Aviatrix has a lot of good controls on their devices that allow you to do BGP approvals or TGW attachment route approvals, things of that nature, which you should take advantage of.
Right, before somebody actually makes the attachment.
But yeah, in your example, was able to actually see where somebody, may have been me, I don't know, inadvertently approved a bunch of routes that shouldn't have been approved, and it was quite a large number, but going back through the topology replay, was able to see the list before and after,
and know exactly
what needed to be removed and rectify the situation.
Right.
So, yeah.
Great.